feed section. As you know, we count on membership dues and donations to fund high-quality library programs such as Dr. Watson's.
Screen, like a little bar.
Yeah, but it doesn't go louder.
Is the bar all the way across?
Can all of you stop talking who are watching, because not all of you are muted. Okay. So we count on membership and dues to fund high quality library programs such as Dr. Watson's lectures at the Sterling Road Library. Another exciting program we're going to have is a 5-part series, which is a fascinating look at Broadway plays. And that will begin on Thursday, October 22nd. To find out more about all the upcoming programs, as well as how you can support the Friends, please view our website, sterlingfriends.org. Or if you want to put in the chat room that you want more information about membership or donations, I will get back to you. I want to thank a few of our new viewers for joining the Friends in the past 2 weeks who found out about our organization through Dr. Watson. Following the presentation, any questions you have, enter in the chat box. And again, if everybody can mute themselves, I would appreciate it. And I recommend you switch to the active speaker view during the session. And in case we get into any politics, the politics are endorsed necessarily by the Friends of the Library.
Don't you hear anything?
Okay. Our speaker, Dr. Watson, is an award-winning author, historian, visiting scholar, political commentator, and distinguished professor of American history at Lynn University. Previously, at the first 2 lectures, I spoke about Dr. Watson's accomplishments as a writer, publisher, and media commentator, as well as some of his many awards and accolades. Robert Watson is also a community leader and has hosted community town halls on current issues, organized voter registration drives, and provided civic education programs to school children. In addition, he was instrumental in bringing the 3rd presidential debate of 2012, Obama versus Romney, to Lynn University. And that's quite an honor to host one of the debates. Lynn University was only one of 12 sites, was one of only 12 sites being considered by the Commission on Presidential Debates to host the debates. And after yesterday's evening news, you can all know it takes a lot of work to host a debate well. Dr. Watson, the board members of the Friends, and all of our viewers would like to thank you for an extraordinary series that has been thoroughly enjoyed by their participants. We look forward to today's presentation, Women in Politics, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I promise this will not be nearly as painful as the debate last night. So yes, we, Lynn University, Little Lynn here in South Florida, had the great honor of hosting the final presidential debate of 2012, which in my opinion was the last real presidential debate we've ever had. And it's a lot of work. It's a 2-year-long process. Since Rhonda mentioned it, here's the inside skinny for all of you. It takes about 2 years. The application is online, and you need to start 2 years early to reach out to the Nonpartisan Commission on Presidential Debates. What they do is back in 2012, there were 79 universities that passed the initial step. And then they, as you heard Rhonda correctly note, they took that down to 12. Once they get down to 12, they do on-site visits, and they have a whole kind of second round. You have to have a theater that is modern and can seat. They don't want something that seats 3,000 or 4,000 because then it's cavernous, but they don't want something with 100 or 200. They like a mid-size. Our theater at Lynn seats about 750, so that was perfect. So they want a theater that has all the modern amenities with technology and lighting and everything. And our theater at the time was almost new. In fact, I told the university when we submitted our application, we wrote that our theater still has the new car smell. So I think that helped. You have to have an international airport nearby. We have 3 here in South Florida. You have to have banks that can cash currency and exchange currency into almost any type of currency in the world, because you literally have media outlets from every country on earth that come to your campus. South Florida, we have, a bank on every intersection. You have to have social amenities. There has to be restaurants, hotels, things to do. And of course, everybody knows in South Florida, if you've seen my waistline lately, you know we have too many good restaurants and we have too many hotels. So we were able to put a check mark in every box for the application. Then they come and visit on site and they narrow that down. They finally award 3 presidential debates and 1 vice presidential debate. Of the 79 universities in the country that passed the first round, Lynn came in first place. We were the national winner. So we got our pick. So we picked the 3rd and final debate. And by dumb luck, if you remember in 2012, Romney won the first debate, Obama won the second, and it was a nail biter going into the 3rd debate. Obama won the 3rd big, and that's what pushed him across the finish line. So we were very fortunate in that respect. And I'm not making this up, I swear to you. Most of you know me. I was looking at the names earlier. Most of you know. Oh, and by the way, let me say hello to Karen and Richard. Karen and Richard, I just say hello to you no matter. I just assume you're on every speech that I'm doing. I see Linda and Stuart have joined us. Claire is back. Andy and Wendy and Auntie Jane. So thanks, everybody. Anyway, so you all know me. You know I don't pull punches. I call it the way it is. Honestly, the nonpartisan commission said Lynn hosted the best debate they've ever had, and they've been asking us, begging us to apply again subsequent years because nobody's matched what we did. Lynn put on, our president of our campus called it a preemptive charm offensive. We had treats in the rooms. We picked them up in style. I mean, we really, really did a good job. What we did also was, Lynn, as you may know, we were just ranked the most international university in the South. I think we're 4th most international in the country. Something like 25% of our student body is from abroad. And we have a student from almost every country on earth. So what we did is we had students from, Madagascar, from Chile, from Romania, walking around with the sign written in, hi, I'm from Romania, ask me a question. So the reporters from there loved that. And then we also had the students providing all the reporters and the Obama campaign, the Romney campaign, with drinks and sandwiches. I mean, they didn't even have to ask. So, and of course, everybody loves it when an eager 19-year-old or 20-year-old student is doing it. So we did all of that. We also did some other things that I think the commission loved. I put together a presidential debate exhibit in our library. We had 3 original Abraham Lincoln ribbons from 1860, without the beard, by the way. He grew it after he won before the inauguration. We had John Kerry's debate podium from 2004. I went on, I did a free debate curriculum guide, which was picked up by 38,000 schools around the country. We worked through Apple and made it available for free so teachers around the country could integrate the debate into their curriculum. I had, I can't remember how many, dozens and dozens of schools around the country. I went on and did these, like before Zoom, we did smart TV kind of talks where I could beam into a school and have middle school kids in South Carolina ask questions about the debate. We brought a couple thousand area kids from South Florida to campus to see the debate exhibit and to see the campus. And our security officers at Lynn, our police, even dressed up like Secret Service officers with the earpiece and the sunglasses. We gave every kid that came to campus a lantern with press credentials. So they thought they were in the press. We did some really, really fun things. I had a contest for kids in Florida, a trivia contest, and the winners, I got a budget and we bought pizzas for them and we made videos about the debate for them. And then I had a contest for kids also. You had to guess how many cars were in Obama's motorcade, okay? Including the ambulance with the blood supply, the motorcycles and everything. And it was something like 58. Romney actually had more, believe it or not. My line to the media was he had to put all of his kids in the car. So all the kids that came to Lynn, we had a couple thousand that bid on this contest. And the winner, whomever won it, I would go to their school with pizzas and I would do a little talk about the debate and they could ask me questions. So that was the contest. Not much of a prize if you ask me. Guess who won the contest out of thousands of young kids? My daughter, Isabella. And I swear I didn't tell her. I didn't know how many cars were in the motorcade. I made one of my students, his name was Hunter Landau. I made him stand on the Yamato Street exit off of I-95 with a video camera and film it. So there wouldn't be any doubt. And then he and I counted the number of cars. So my daughter won the contest after all that. And of course it was bad news because none of the teachers and none of the press, nobody believed me. They thought I set the whole thing up when I didn't. And then the news got even worse. When I told my daughter that she won, here's what she said to me. Please, Dad, do not come to my school and embarrass me in front of everybody. Please was like 4 syllables. Please. So I'm like, come on, you got the coolest dad in the world. She's like, do not come because I know you. You'll walk into class like Obama did this and Romney did that and yada, yada, yada. She goes, no. So I didn't even get to go to her school. I just sent the pizzas. So that's how you get a presidential debate. I think everybody, the reason why Lynn won, I mean, I think we crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's, we did a good job, but this is how we opened our debate application. We said, we don't want to host a debate. What we wanted to do was use the debate to promote as a vehicle to promote civic engagement across South Florida. So we announced to them that we're going to develop the free curriculum guide that I did, everything. We did so much. I mean, so much. We even had a red, white, and blue pool party for our students. We had a red, white, and blue barbecue party for, I mean, there was a Stump Watson trivia contest for the community. We did everything. So we did a lot of really cool things. So I worked for 2 years, and I mean, there were literally 12, 15-hour days to get ready for this thing. It was just extraordinary. And I remember all along, a couple of friends of mine, my kids, my wife were like, you know, this had better be worth it. You're working your tail off. And I said, don't worry, baby. We're getting free tickets. We'll be sitting in the front row next to Michelle Obama, you know, M.O., me, you know, it'll all be worth it. So right before the debate, the president of our campus, who's an amazing guy and a real entrepreneur, he had so many good ideas for this. He calls the committee together, the people that did all the work, and says, listen, universities are supposed to get like 100 tickets for their students. He goes, I'm going to tell the commission, since you keep saying we've done a better job, he said, we want a couple hundred tickets for our students. You say that you like that we're driving a civic education initiative, put up or shut up. And he talked them into it, and they gave us an extra allotment of tickets for our students. Then he says this, he goes, so I've got an exciting idea to announce to everybody. And I'm like, okay, bring it, let's hear it. He goes, here's what we're gonna do. He said, me, Dr. Watson, none of us are gonna go to the debate. And I'm like, hold on. What did you just say? He said, we're gonna take our tickets and we're gonna give them to our students. No one would do such a thing. And I'm thinking to myself, that's a good idea, but I want to go to the debate, right? So here's what he did. Like the lottery, we had a big party, pizza, live music. Our whole campus came out, and we got like the lottery when you spin the wheel and you pull out a number. So we put all the kids' names in, and he reaches in and pulls out, and then I would pull one out, and we'd read the kids' names, and we'd give them our tickets. So the president set it up for the first one. We had an 80-some-year-old guy named Jack who was in World War II. And he came back to get a degree in psychology because he wanted to help veterans at the VA. So the president hid Jack's name in his hand, pretended to reach in and called Jack. and gave Jack his ticket. Do you remember Stormin Norman Schwarzkopf from the first Persian Gulf War? His niece went to school here and just was a real leader on campus. So I hid her name and gave her my ticket. And we gave all the tickets away for free. So we didn't, not even the president of our campus, no one. We gave all of our tickets to our students, which is what nobody does. So I'm still angry, but it was a wonderful thing to do. Okay, with that said, let's talk about women. I'm gonna pull up my PowerPoint for everybody. There we go, boom. And I think Hannah and everybody was saying beforehand off camera, if we had had 2 women last night, I think we would have had a better debate. It would have been more civil. So let's talk about women in high office. I was going to start this by talking about the 19th Amendment, but I understand that Sterling Road had a good speech on the 19th Amendment. So during the Q&A, if anybody has any questions about it, and it literally came down to 1 vote in Tennessee, by the way, should never have passed. It's a great story. Let me know during the Q&A and I'm happy to talk about it. So several years ago, I did 2 projects that were a lot of fun. One, I surveyed women in elected office all across the country, and I asked them a series of questions. Secondly, I decided to follow it up with phone calls and interview women in various offices in various states around the country. And the first question in my survey, and the first thing we talked about on the phone, which was basically the whole interview, I said simply this: what challenges do you face in politics as a woman? What are some unique challenges as a woman? And people really wanted to talk about it. And I got an earful. You realize how absolutely gendered politics happens to be. In fact, the presidency, apropos to last night's debate, the presidency is the most gendered office in the country. Years ago, there was a fun survey done where they asked Americans what they wanted in a president and who they wanted. And they essentially said the person that came out first place was Walter Cronkite. They wanted a father figure. The presidency is a very paternal office. They want a father figure. So that's a big challenge against women who try to run for the presidency. And I think we saw Donald Trump last night trying to be an alpha male, the key word being trying. Again, the comments here are only mine. This is not Rhonda, Hannah, the Friends, or the Sterling Road Library. So please don't be upset with them. It's me, but trying to be. So here's a list I put for you together of what women told me are the biggest challenges facing women because of their sex. The number 1 thing that they said was fundraising. Fundraising. In the typical race around the country, state, Senate, US House, governor, president, pick any race. Men will out fundraise women by a large margin. So women still have trouble fundraising. Now, not a $20 check that some person sends in, but the big bucks, the big, 4, 5, 6, 7-figure type of things that come in. That's still of, by, and for men. I can only really name in modern times 3 women that have been able to raise money on par with or better than men, and that would be Hillary Clinton, Sarah Palin, and Nancy Pelosi. Those 3 are gigantic fundraisers. What we saw, we had a record 6 women ran for president in 2020. For 6, that's the record. But none of them could raise money. So this is still a problem in 2020. Of course, it's sexist. The presidency, if you look at polling, there are a number of reasons why people vote for president. There are single issue voters out there, sure, who vote based on one thing. But of all the issues and reasons why we vote for president, what polls show us is there are 2 in particular. We want someone to keep the country safe, national security, and someone to grow the economy or manage the economy. Here's the bad news for women. Polling suggests that most Americans believe women are not good at 2 things: national security and managing the economy. If anybody lived through the end of George W. Bush's presidency, you know that men aren't good at running the economy. If anybody ever met Golda Meir or Margaret Thatcher or a lot of other women from history, you know that the idea that women are soft is not true. So, but the perception is that women are not good at running the economy or keeping us safe. And if that's why we elect the president, so women have those strikes against them. And I think the fundraising ties into the economic thing. By the way, Gerald Ford once said that the first female president we elect will be a Republican. And I agreed with that years ago because if you look at it, women have those two strikes against them. The other thing is people believe that Republicans are better at national security and at the economy than Democrats. So a woman who's a Democrat would have multiple strikes against her. I would challenge the assumption that Republicans do a better job with the economy or national security. I would challenge that in a New York minute. But women perceptually have all those problems against them. Then Gerald Ford ended his quote by saying this, and once we elect a woman president, we'll never have another male president, which I thought was cute. And you know, what you see in parts of Northern Europe, Scandinavia, is there have been women after a woman after a woman. There's been successive women elected as prime minister in those countries, to the point where if you're a 10 or 15-year-old kid, you would ask your parents, Mommy, can we have a male prime minister? Because they've had woman after woman after woman, and they've had some good ones. So, so fundraising is a big issue. I asked a woman who was a state senator in Alabama, a Republican, and if memory serves, she was the only woman in the state Senate at the time. I asked her to name the biggest challenge she faces as a woman. And she said, oh, that's easy. I don't golf. And I said, okay, what do you mean by that? She goes, well, it's fundraising. Where do you think money is raised? She says, here in Alabama, money is raised in 3 places. In the press box at the Alabama-Auburn football game, but no one would invite me there. The locker room of the club, and I'm not legally allowed to go there, or on the golf course. So I said to her, Senator, with all due respect, you better learn to golf. And she goes, are you kidding me? It takes 4 hours plus. She says, you know, being a state legislator in all 50 states is a part-time job. She said, I also have a full-time job. I have a husband. I have kids. Who has the time to golf? What did Mark Twain call golf? I always like this. A good walk interrupted. I don't golf. I don't have 4.5 hours in my day. Fundraising is a huge challenge for women. The other thing that we find a lot of wealthy men doing is what they call bundling the money. So if I want to support, you know, Richard for governor, I'm limited in how much money I can donate to his campaign. If I want to support him for president, I'm limited. So let's say it's about $2,000 per campaign. So I give $2,000 in the primary and another $2,000 in the general. But here's what I'll do. If I have $100,000 to donate, I'll pick 50,000 friends of mine and give them each $2,000 to donate. So I'm not over the $2,000 limit. That's called bundling. And what you find is a lot of big PACs, political action committees, and a lot of wealthy men will get these big bundled types of approaches. The second thing that I found that women told me is a big challenge for women in office is what anthropologists and sociologists call the second shift syndrome. This is what we mean here. So a man comes home from his shift at work, 9 to 5. And what do men all do at 5 o'clock when they get home from work, ladies? They sit in their chair, they fall asleep, all right? That's what they all do, right? And don't they all have a designated chair? It's a guy, it must have something with when we were in caves, they had a designated rock when they were cavemen. So all men have a designated chair and they come home at 5 and take a nap. Same question. What do working women do when they come home from their shift from 9 to 5? They start their second shift, which is domesticity. What we find even today in 2020, among 2 income couples, that is both wife and husband work, guess who still does 90% of the domestic work? The diaper changing, the cooking, the cleaning, the shopping, the sewing, the dropping the kids off at school or soccer practice. The woman still does 90% of the domestic work, which means this: women have less leisure time in the United States than men do. If you want to run for political office, you need leisure time. Number one, you better be a member of Kiwanis, Rotary, Chamber, a bunch of social groups to put it in your resume and get those groups to support you. Number two, you got to go out and talk to the police department, the firefighters, and every other group. Number three, you got to stand outside the local high school auditorium after the basketball game and shake hands. Then you got to go out for dinners with all the fundraisers. Women don't have the time to do that because of the domestic work, because of domesticity. So I remember years ago when I had this conversation with all these women, and they kept talking about it, although not all of them called it the second shift syndrome, but they all complained about domestic work and just not having the time to run for office. I remember thinking, I'm a proud feminist. I'm an unapologetic feminist, as all men should be. If you have a mother, if you have a wife, if you have a daughter, if you have a sister, if you have a grandmother, of course you should be a feminist. And I remember thinking, okay, do I do 50% of the domestic work at home? Now, my wife doesn't work full-time. She works part-time and volunteers at the school. And I have about 4 different jobs. I work like 20 hours a day. But still, I looked at, okay, I do the dishes, she does the laundry. I do the shopping, she does the sewing. And I broke it down. I probably did 25 to 33%, a quarter to a third of the diapers, of the bottles of milk and whatever else. So I wasn't even close to 50%. And yet I do a lot of it to the point where friends, when my kids were little, would make comments about me, Mr. Mom kind of a thing. But I didn't even come close to it. So we've got to begin to change the breakdown in the household of the domestic work, or women won't have the time to run for political office. Number 3, the empty nest. Oh, by the way, a couple of women told me they had a 3rd shift. Want to know what that was? Taking care of their husbands. That was their 3rd shift. Finding his glasses. Where's the remote control? It's under your butt. You're sitting on it. The 3rd one that women talked about was the empty nest syndrome. So when do men run for political office? Answer, whenever they want to. When do women run for political office? When the kids are raised and out of the household. You get that from a lot of women, especially previous generations. So here's the problem. If women aren't even running until the kids are raised and out of the household, we're limiting the number of women in the candidate pool. Plus today, people are getting married much later. People are waiting to have children much later. So by the time, and kids are moving back into the home because of this economy, by the time the kids are out of the house, women will be perceived as being too old to run for office. So we've got to begin to change this mindset as well. That will change when we change the equation of who does all the domestic work. Media bias. Clearly, some media outlets are way more biased than others, but there's still a bias. I remember well, for example, when Elizabeth Dole was running in 1999 for the 2000 election. She dropped out early, but when she was running, she was in New Hampshire, and I was in my car listening to NPR. Are you like me, where you talk to the radio? Anyone? Did anybody talk back to the television last night? Oh man, my TV's ears were burning. Okay, I talked to the radio. I have, on more than one occasion, I have pulled off to the road and dialed the channel to fact check and correct them on something I've heard them say on the radio. So I was listening to NPR, which is probably, arguably, the least sexist media outlet in the country. And they're interviewing Elizabeth Dole as she's walking around New Hampshire. And this is what they asked her. How do you plan to walk around that snow of in New Hampshire with your high heel pumps? Now, that's not a legitimate question. If Elizabeth Dole answered F you, she would be the word that rhymed with witch. If she talked about my Bruno Mollies or my Ferragamos or whatever, she wouldn't sound like presidential material, right? So what an inappropriate question. Sexism in male voters. There have been a number of polls done over about the last 30 years. I did a book on this many years ago and put the polls in my book. They continue to ask them. If a woman in your political party was running for office, would you be willing to vote for a woman for president? That's the question. The polls show us that about 93% of Americans say they'd be willing to vote for a woman for president. Now, you could take this as the glass is 93% full or that the glass is 7% empty. I see it clearly as the glass is 7% empty. Number one, from 2000 up until today, every presidential election has been decided by 1 or 2 percentage points. So I wouldn't want to run for president 7 points down. I wouldn't want to run for president knowing that 7% of the country wouldn't vote for me just because I have a womb. You know, you don't want to play the Los Angeles Lakers in basketball and spot LeBron 7 points at the beginning of the game. But that's what all women are doing. Number two, you know and I know that those numbers aren't accurate. What we do know from polling is that people tend to fib in polls. People tend to say the socially responsible thing. For example, in polling, people always say that they make more money than they really do, which is absurd because the polls are anonymous and confidential. No one knows who's filling the poll out, but people still say they make more money than they really do, kind of like the president. According to polling, people never miss religious services. Everybody goes to temple or mass or whatever every week, and you know that's not the truth. According to polling, people donate money to causes and charities constantly. No, they don't, or the charities wouldn't be asking all the time. According to polling, men indicate that they have sex more than they really do, and women indicate that they have it less than they really do. So I don't know what that says. My theory is that there's a lot more gay males in this country than, because who are they sleeping with then? Right? So, so we know people fib in polls. So even if it's anonymous and confidential, I suspect a lot of men will get that poll and will write down, yes, sure, I'll vote for a woman, because they want to say the socially responsible thing, when in fact, they probably wouldn't. Here's the other challenge for a Democrat, is the 7% are Republicans. I know you're surprised and shocked by that statement. It's Republican men who won't vote for a Democratic woman. I would go so far as to say Republican men would rather take a bullet to the head than vote for a Democratic woman. So here's the challenge for a Democratic woman that a Republican woman would not have, in addition to you know, national security and issues like the economy. In order to win the presidency, there's a couple of basic ways to do it. One is you get your base out. You got to get your base out to vote. Number two is you got to get those swing voters, those crossover voters. Republicans get their base out, Dems get their base out, but Dems need to siphon off a couple of Republicans, Republicans siphon off some Democrats. Obama took some Republicans in 2008, Reagan took a lot of Dems in 1980 and 84, and so on. The guess is that Biden might take some moderate Republicans this time around. We'll find out soon. So you got to pick them off. Now, here's the problem. If a woman's running for office, if she is a Republican, most Democratic men say, yes, theoretically, I'd be willing to cross the aisle and vote for a Republican woman if I like her. Whereas Republican men would not cross the aisle and vote for a Democratic woman. Hell no. So that would be a challenge for women. To build onto that, several years ago, I believe it was when I was at the University of Hawaii. I actually taught there. They had a chancellor's fellow where they pick the outstanding student and they get an award. But they added that by having the student do an intensive research project, something they could publish or they present at the end of the academic year at an honors colloquium or symposium. And I remember they picked a student and she picked me to be her professor to monitor her research project. And we sat and we talked and I said, okay, what are you interested in? Sexism. She said, I want to be an advocate to fight for women. So I said, that's great. And I threw out a bunch of topics. Why don't you write a paper on the 19th Amendment? Why don't you write a paper on the notorious RBG? or why don't you write a paper on Gloria Steinem? Or, what are you interested in? She said, no, I want to find out why men are sexist. So we designed a really cool study. Here's what we did. We asked men a whole bunch of questions that typically are never asked. Things like this. If your wife wanted to keep her maiden name and not take your name, would you be okay with that? Number two, if she made more money than you and you were both offered jobs in different cities, would you be willing to go to her city and follow her rather than her follow you to your job? Number three, if your wife makes a lot more money than you and you have a child, would you be willing to stay home with the kid and have her go to work? Makes more sense economically. We even said if she doesn't want to wear her wedding band, if she doesn't want to shave her arms or legs, or, we put all kinds of questions down. So what we did was we found out it depends who asks the question and where you ask it. So for example, she would walk around campus asking the question. And what she found is all the male students she asked and the male professors, they all said, sure, I'd be willing to follow her to her job. Sure, if she doesn't want to take my last name. Sure, if she doesn't want to wear a wedding band, because she asked the questions. Then what we did is we recruited male students to go around and ask the questions. And when a male student asked it, we found almost half the men on campus said, no, she has to follow my job. She better take my name. So it depended so men said the socially desirable thing if a woman asked the question, not if a man. But then we went out and we had her and guys go to bars and ask a group of men at bars. And it was hilarious. We were recording all these. The men, when they would say, if your wife makes more than you, hell no, I'd never marry someone who made more than me. We found that men were Neanderthals. They were absolute knuckle draggers when it came out to all these issues. So when a man asked another man those questions at a bar, forget about it. But we've seen the same kind of thing in polling. When an African American asks a white, do you support affirmative action? They say yes. When another white says, do you support it? Then they say no. So let me just, at the end here, executive office and a bench. One of the things that's interesting about this is women aren't running for office in numbers that men are. So if 500 men run for office this year and only 50 women run for office, of course more men are going to get elected. We need women to run for office. There's a fascinating series of studies, I love these, that are done that ask men and women about reasons why they do or don't run for office. And I had this conversation with the women that I interviewed that are in office. Here's what they ask. So if you knew you only had a 5% chance of winning, would you still run for office? The far majority of men say what? Yes. The far majority of women say what? No. I don't know, this doesn't say that women are less ambitious than men. That's not the right word. Maybe women are more prudent, more wise, more realistic, more cautious. I don't know what the right word is, but women are more than likely to not run than run if they don't have a good chance of winning. Men will run and think they're going to win even if they have a 1% chance. If you have to raise money from unsavory sources, if you have to take money from big oil or big pharmacies or trial lawyers, whatever, would you still run for office? The majority of men say what? Of course. The majority of women say what? No. So men are going to run even if they have to take it. Men don't have qualms about blood money in politics. Women do, at least most women. Number three, the one that I thought was really fun, if you knew you were going to be the target of negative campaigning, would you still run? If you knew you were going to get hammered with a negative campaign, think about it, everybody. Think about the courage it took for Joe Biden to stand there as Trump hammered his son after Biden lost his entire family, to stand there and have somebody just lie and say horrible things about you. Think about the courage it takes for anyone to run for office when at the end of the day, you sit down, turn the TV on, and there's a 30-second commercial making you look like Mussolini. It's rough. You've got to have rhinoceros skin if you run for office. So the question is, if you knew you were going to be the subject of a target of some nasty 30-second commercials, would you still run for office? The majority of men, they say yes. The majority of women, they say no. They say no. Here's the problem. Women cannot have these kind of ethical scruples. We need women, because to win public office, you need to be a single-minded seeker of elections. You can't have reservations. Otherwise, we're simply not going to get women elected in the same numbers. Here's the flip side of that, something I've written about and lectured about for probably 20 years, is all these studies suggest that women are more ethical than men and would govern in a way that's different from men. Therefore, I think when women start running in higher numbers and getting elected in higher numbers, this could be a great leap forward in cleaning up the ethical cesspool that politics has become, that women will exercise it more judiciously. We have one state in the United States where over 50% of the state legislature is female. That's Nevada, 52%. And the question we've always asked, and I did a study and wrote a scholarly article about this like 25 years ago, where I asked, do women govern differently than men? Mayors, city managers, whatever. And in Nevada, I think the answer is yes, a resounding yes. Since women took over the state legislature, they have been moving on things like healthcare for everyone, childcare, clean air, clean water. And Nevada has never been known as a progressive state in those kind of issues. So I think it does make a difference. I'll share a story with you that I've told very, very few people over the years. 15, I guess it was years ago, I was thinking about running for Congress. And there was a seat that opened up here in South Florida, in our district in Palm Beach and Broward County. Does anybody remember E. Clay Shaw, S-H-A-W? Yeah, he was a Republican and he was in that seat for a quarter of a century. And Palm Beach and Broward County, it's a Democratic area. How is it a Republican has been in there for a quarter of a century? The short answer is Democrats always find a way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. They ran the worst, most pathetic candidates against him every 2 years. So I wrote a position paper for the Democratic Party for free, just telling them, how do you beat Shaw? And here's all the ways you do it. For example, we have a large Jewish community in South Florida. Shaw was not strong on Israel and didn't even go to Israel. I mean, goodness. The Everglades are a big issue down here in our aquifer. Shaw was bad on clean water. Our other big issue is beach renourishment and hurricane mitigation, because we get hit all the time. And Shaw was weak on those issues too. So the issues that are of interest to Southeast Florida were not his issues. So he would be easy to be beaten. And I found out as I surveyed people and interviewed people, nobody even knew who he was. I remember making a joke, which my students today wouldn't understand. I told the Democratic Party, you should get a milk carton and put his picture on the back of it and say, has anybody seen this guy? I mean, does anybody even know who he is? He wasn't a bad guy, but he wasn't a good guy. He was just there. So the Democratic Party ran up some polling, and as the prospective Democrats who could beat Shaw, and I swear I didn't ask, I swear I didn't know, I found out much later. They threw my name into it just because I do what I'm doing now all the time, blah, blah, blah. And I had a radio show and a TV show for years. I had 2 radio shows. I was beating all the Democrats in South Florida, even though I never raised a penny and never ran for anything. So I admit that for 3 months, I let my ego get the best of me. You know, Winston Churchill had this great line when people would say, oh, he's so humble. Churchill would say, you know, he's humble for a reason. I'm usually humble for a reason. But I let my ego get the best of me, and I put together an exploratory committee to run for office, to run for Congress. And I wasn't going to raise blood money. I was going to do it the right way. And I remember I organized picnics. If you wanted to donate to me, I said that I was going to do X number of public events before I asked for a penny. The problem is every politician asks you for money when they first meet you. I said, I want to earn your donation and not have to ask for it. So if you want to donate, here's what we did. We had picnics for the Boys and Girls Club, the Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and charities. And if you wanted to support my campaign, I put out giant like plastic bins with my name on it. You came and you made your donation, and we gave everything to the Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers, Big Sisters. And then we asked people to bring backpacks for school supplies and crayons and glue sticks and everything like that. So that's the way we were running it. And I remember the media, it started to catch on a little bit. So the media came to one of my events. And I'm like, oh, this is great. Because they're going to see all these kids from the Boys and Girls Club. And how does your heart not move when you see them? And then they'll see all these supporters of mine, and we were cooking up and grilling. They were doing burgers and hot dogs and chips on the grill. And it was just a big fun picnic we'd all have. So I would get people to bring footballs, and then I give them to the little boys in the Boys and Girls Club. So a bunch of the kids wanted to throw the football. I used to play football in college. I know I'm old and out of shape, but I used to be a pretty good athlete a long time ago. So I go out, and the kids are running patterns, and I'm throwing like 40-yard spirals that hit the kid without breaking stride. If any of you are sports fans, you know what I'm talking about. I was throwing like Peyton Manning right on the numbers. And I'm thinking the press is going to love this. What the press did is the articles that came out were twofold. Number one, Watson needs to go back to the ivory tower. He hasn't even raised a penny. What is he thinking? And I'm going, are you kidding me? Didn't you see the picnic? We're going to start raising money. The second thing was this. I got all these calls from the Palm Beach Post, the Sun Sentinel, and other outlets, the Miami Herald, that said, we have unsolicited calls that you're sleeping with all your female students on campus. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness. So I said, well, first off, it's complete nonsense. Not even a wink. But I don't take my word for it. Follow me around. Show up unannounced. Talk to anybody on campus. Talk to anybody in South Florida. And they'll tell you, if anything, Watson's a bit nerdy and wonky, right? But here's the thing. I kept getting these calls from reporters. And I talked to a bunch of friends of mine. And I said, look, this is difficult. I'm going to have to break this down to my wife and her mother. And at some point, that listen, there may be a newspaper story out there, by the way, that I sleep with all my students. Now it's not true. And if the reporter does his work or her work, the answer will be no. But all the male friends of mine, when I said, what do you think? They all said, screw it, just run anyway. Who cares? It's negative campaigning. It's part of the game. Just run. Every one of my female friends said, oh, you can't run. You have a reputation. You have a family. You live in the community. Oh, could you imagine? And I thought, wow. I probably talked to 20 and 20. Every single guy said run. Every single woman said don't run. And myself, my view was, honestly, I didn't care. I thought anybody that believes this, they're not a friend anyway. And anybody that knows me isn't going to believe it. So the good news was the reporters all eventually called me and say, we know it was just sour grape from one of the Republicans was just bad-mouthing you. So they didn't run the stories. So, but men and women have a different view on it. So here's my trivia question for all of you. Who was the first woman that ran for president? And what year was it? Are you ready? Oh, yeah, it would help if I forwarded the slide. Boom! Here it is, 1872. Victoria Woodhall, first woman to run for president. There she is. I'm a big fan of hers. She was an amazing woman, young, attractive, smart, properly feisty, self-taught lawyer, author, published a book. She was a remarkable woman. Now, in 1872, of course, women didn't have the right to vote. They wouldn't get the right to vote until 1920, right, everybody? 100 years ago in August. So Victoria Woodhall, when she tried to even register to vote, she was arrested. When she tried to campaign for herself, she was arrested. And when she showed up at the polls on election day, she was arrested. Neither party, Dem or Republican, would let her run. So she had to run under a third party, an equal rights party. Now, one of the stories from the 19th Amendment apropos to Victoria Woodhull running was, those of you that know me and have heard me talk about women's history know that I'm a big Elizabeth Cady Stanton fan. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, back in 1840, when she got married, and her husband said, what do you want to do for the honeymoon? She said, there's an international anti-slavery convention in Europe. I want to go to it. That's what she wanted to do for her honeymoon. That's my kind of gal. So she goes all the way to Europe. She arrives there for the anti-slavery convention, and guess what? They don't admit women. Could you imagine? I mean, number one, there's something fundamentally wrong with the group meeting to fight against discrimination who are discriminating, right? You know, I've always said, and those of you that know me well know, for the life of me, I have never understood how someone who's gay can be racist, how someone who's Black can be anti-Semitic, someone who's Jewish can be homophobic. I just don't understand how any group that has encountered a history of hate can turn around and do it. Anyways, so Victoria Woodhall, so Elizabeth Cady Stanton is not admitted to the Anti-Slavery Convention. She goes outside of the convention and is sitting out there stewing. She's angry. This is where she meets Lucretia Mott. When there's a recess, a break in the convention, one of the male conferees comes out and sees them outside and approaches them and asks them, you know, why are they upset? And they tell him why, and he's livid. Who was that man? Frederick Douglass, the great former slave orator, who would become best buds, BFFs, with Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And when she convened the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, in July, in New York, guess who was there? Frederick Douglass. And they always worked together. So guess who Victoria Woodhull's vice presidential running mate was? Frederick Douglass, as a shout out to Elizabeth Cady Stanton. So when Obama and Hillary were running in 2008, I used to write a column for the Sun Sentinel newspaper. I was a Sunday columnist for many years. I wrote my column saying when Obama and Hillary, when it looked like they were going to be on a ticket, I said Victoria Woodhull and Frederick Douglass are in heaven looking down saying, what on earth took you so long? The second woman to run for president was this person. That's Belva Lockwood. And she ran twice in the 1880s. She wasn't, and I hate the word serious, but she wasn't really running to win. She was running to shake things up, to try to put people in their, you know, there's nothing wrong with being uncomfortable. When people are uncomfortable, that's usually where change begins. So she was putting people in their discomfort zone. She would publicly announce that she lived with men of different races in the same house, as she was just trying to shake things up. But Belva ran. But then we'd have to wait all the way until 1964. Talk about, you know, Rhonda said a century of women in politics. We'd have to wait until 1964 before another woman ran. You're looking at her, Margaret Chase Smith. No one viewing today was born by 1964. So you'll have no idea who she was. She was a Republican. She becomes the first woman on a major party ticket. She was from Maine, and she had served in both the House and the Senate and represented women very well. She was a credible candidate, a great politician, very effective. She said, I never got a chance to meet and interview her. I was 2 when she ran. Never got a chance to meet her, but she said that her big complaint was this, that all of the men that were running for president, the media would always call them Senator so-and-so or Governor so-and-so. They always called her Mrs. Smith. So there's your dog whistle, Mrs. Smith. Then in 1972, everybody, we break the color barrier. Shirley Chisholm. Now, about half of you were born by 1972, so you'll remember Shirley Chisholm from New York with the great campaign motto, unbought and unbossed. By the way, Kamala Harris gave a shout out to Shirley Chisholm. Harris's campaign signs, colors, and look, it was Shirley Chisholm's look from 72. Shirley Chisholm ran in 72. She was from New York. So you know that there's a rule, a law in New York that at some point when you're close to retirement, you have to move to Florida. You're all aware of that law, right? So since Shirley Chisholm was a New Yorker, she moved to Florida, to Palm City. I had a chance to interview her before her passing. And she said this was her big frustration. Black men would not vote for her or campaign for her because they told her that the first Black to run for the presidency has to be a man, not a woman. Wow. And she marched with them in the 60s. She told me that a Black man would be elected president before a white woman. How about that? You know what I said? Yeah, right. She was right. She was right. So Shirley Chisholm felt that her sex was a bigger obstacle for her politically than her race. Another historic first, 1984, GeraldineFerraro, first female vice presidential nominee on a major party ticket, the Democrats. She was picked by Walter Mondale in 1984. Ferraro was a 3-term congresswoman from New York, right, everybody? Because she was from New York, what does that mean? Rhonda, what's that mean? Because she was from New York? It means she had to move to Florida, right? So she did. She was down in Key Largo. So I interviewed her twice, and she told me her big frustration was this. She gave her first speech about national security, because that's seen as a men's issue. And she said, I gave a 30-minute address on national security, and the first question I was asked, she said, was, what designer are you going to be wearing? So I said to her, what'd you say? She said, I couldn't say anything. Because if I complained, I'd be the word that rhymes with rich, which Barbara Bush, if you remember, used to always call Ferraro the woman that rhymes with rich. She said, but if I answered the question, I wouldn't look presidential. Pat Schroeder ran in 1988, 84 and 88. She formed Exploratories in 84 and ran in 88. Schroeder from the 1st District of Colorado. Schroeder told me the following. She said, sometimes a woman's biggest critic is another woman. She said, I found that when I ran, I had women pushing back saying to me, you're abandoning your maternal responsibility by running, because I have a daughter at home. She said, I used to always answer, well, I'm glad you brought that up, because my male opponent is obviously then abandoning his paternal responsibility by running. Schroeder said that at one speech, a woman came up to her and handed her a check for a couple of bucks, and then leans in and says to Schroeder, now do something with your hair. Wow. Men never get that question. In fact, Donald Trump and Joe Biden have the weirdest hairdos in nature, right? But it hasn't hurt them. I have messy hair, and they gave up asking me to cut my hair when I did TV, but I didn't have people writing in saying I'm not watching NBC because of your messy hair, because you look like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, right? But if I was a woman, I get it. The years that I worked for NBC and PBS, the female anchors always talk to me about, they get this kind of mail. Your hair looked terrible. You need a haircut. You gained 5 pounds. You wore that suit or dress a month or two ago. But men never, ever get those comments. I probably had the same shirt and jacket on last Wednesday when I talked to you. And I had a different white shirt and a different same color jacket, the same uniform the Wednesday before, okay? And the same shorts. At any rate, so Schroeder told me another time she was campaigning and a woman handed her a small check, and here's what she said. Do you know that your purse and your shoes don't match? And when Schroeder told me this, it was 20 some years ago, I didn't know that a person's shoes had to match at the time. I've since learned. But men would never get such a thing. There's Elizabeth Dole, who ran for 2000. There's Carol Moseley Braun from Illinois, who ran in 2004. Hillary ran in 2008, and of course became the Democratic nominee in 2016. First time in history, a female nominee on a major party ticket, and actually won the popular vote, everyone, in 2016 by the biggest margin in American election history, by the way. Sarah Palin, and I swear, Rhonda, I didn't put that photo in there. So somebody hacked my PowerPoint. Sarah Palin became the first Republican woman VP nominee to John McCain in 2008. Here's the 6 women who ran in 2020, which is a record, and we still have a female vice presidential nominee in the hunt, could have the first female vice president. And not only that, someone whose mother was from India and whose father was from Jamaica. So multicultural and an immigrant, and was raised in Canada, by the way. So here's a list of women around the world who have headed their governments. As you can see, many countries around the world have had women at the helm. The United States has not. Why? 2 quick theories, because I'm way over time as always. So sorry. Number one, Many women prime ministers around the world have had their father or their husband before them was the prime minister. So they've had direct familial ties. Whereas many men who have been in Congress or the Senate have had a dad or a brother who's been in the Senate before them. John Quincy Adams, our 6th president, benefited by John Adams being his father, our 2nd president. W benefited by George H.W. Bush, his father, being the 41st president. Benjamin Harrison became president in large measure because his grandfather, William Henry Harrison, was president. The Bushes were related to James Madison, our 4th president, and Franklin Pierce, our 14th president. So there's been a lot of these kind of connections. The second reason why we haven't had a woman is we have a presidential system. In Europe and around the world where women get elected, they're usually elected in a prime ministerial or parliamentary system. In a parliamentary system, if you win a safe seat in parliament and then you rise up in seniority, if your party wins a majority, you're the prime minister. Or if your party just gets a plurality, think of Israel now. If you get a plurality, but you put together a coalition government, you're the prime minister. So it's a lot easier. In the United States, you need to win a 2-year-long billion-dollar campaign to be president. So that makes it much more difficult. I'm hopeful that it's not a matter of if, but when we elect a woman president. Here's the countries that have had a woman president. All the countries historically that have had women presidents. Our closest allies, Canada, Israel, and England, have all had women at the helm. I'll end this, and I just want to say something quick. Right now, we have 102 women in the House and 25 women in the Senate. That's about a quarter. That is a record, everybody. It's not near 50%, but the arc is going in the right direction. It's a record. We have 9 female governors, which is a record number of governors, not close to 50, but it's a record number of governors. Plus, it's always harder for women to win executive office than legislative office. Women get elected to city council, not mayor. Women get elected to the state senator, not governor. Women get elected to Congress, not president. So the fact that we have 9 female governors is impressive. Here's the state legislatures at the bottom that you can take a look at. On the percentage, Nevada has over 50, as I said. You see that the Northeast and the West tend to do a good job. The South, no surprise, tends to lag behind, with Mississippi having the worst numbers in the country. Only 13% in the state of Mississippi are women. I would say that it's not a matter of if, but when we elect a woman president. And I found that today, for example, if you think of, let's say, if I think of my grandfathers, or you think of your grandfather, there's no way they would have went to a female doctor. If they went to college, they wouldn't have ever had a female professor. There's no way they would have had a female veterinarian. There's no way they would have hired a female lawyer. They would never have had a female boss. But every young man today has had a female professor, lawyer, doctor, vet, right, everyone? And they don't even think about it. If I asked my students on campus tomorrow, how many of you have had a female professor, lawyer, doctor? They would all go, why are you asking? I mean, it's like breathing. It's a Thursday. Nobody thinks about it. When I went to Virginia Tech and I took my politics and history classes, here's the problem. Besides the professors being so mean back then, I swear to God, it was so militaristic. But the other problem was this: I didn't have any women in my classes. There weren't any women majoring in politics and history. Today, on every university I go to, and I speak at universities around the country, 50% of the politics and history majors are women. I find that most universities today, the majority of student government, female. You know, almost half of folks in law schools, almost half in medical schools, probably 3/4 of veterinary schools are now women. PhD programs, women. An increasing number of women in Fortune 500 companies. So they're beginning to shatter that last glass ceiling. I simply want to end by telling you some things that I get inundated every day with these questions. So I know you all have these questions. I'm going to skip my fact checking. I fact checked the entire debate. If you want to ask about it during the Q&A, have at me. I've done this for 20 some years. So how long do we have to count votes? Will we know who the president is the night of November 3rd? No. This election will last days. With so many Americans voting absentee, vote by mail, it's going to take days to count the vote by mail. Many states have a state law that the state elections offices, every county, Florida has 67 counties, every county has an elections office. Many states have a law that the elections offices cannot start counting votes until election day, which means they're going to be counting just piles of absentee votes that are coming in. And they take longer to count because they take longer to certify, because you have to match the signature to the signature and then double check that they were on the voting rolls. Whereas if you vote in person, when you go to vote, they check the voting rolls when you show up. So it cuts an entire step out. So this could take days. Technically, we have 35 days to get the count right. December 7th, by law, is supposed to be the drop dead date. We've got to have the vote by December 7th. Now, it could be until December 14th. Why is that? Election day is always the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. That's from the framers, okay? Now, the electors meet. The electors meet in every state capital, get this, on the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December to cast the electoral vote. So technically, we're supposed to have till December 7th to count the votes. So if election night Trump announces that it was a huge hoax and he's the winner, good night, everybody. That's not true. You have till December 7th to count. You have till December 14th to certify. That's when the electors certify it. Now, what if the 538 electors cannot agree on who wins the vote in each state? Technically, the state legislatures could certify whichever slate of electors, Democrat or Republican, that they feel is necessary. So let's look at the swing states. What are the swing states? Florida, Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina. All these are swing states. Michigan, guess what? All 6 of those swing states have a Republican legislature. So what you could see on December 14th, if there's a question about the count, you could see the president asking those state legislatures to certify whether they're going to sit or be seated a Democratic or Republican slate of electors. Would the Republican legislatures in those 6 states follow the popular vote? It is not required by law. You do not have to follow the popular vote. We saw in the Bush versus Gore Supreme Court case based on Palm Beach County, Florida in 2000, the precedent was that yes, the state legislatures can revert the process and certify whichever slate they feel should be certified. And the Florida state legislature, with the governor, Jeb Bush, who was George W. Bush's brother, certified the Republicans back then. Article 2 of the Constitution says that the states may appoint in such a manner as the legislature thereof may direct as they see fit. So you could have a scenario like that. What if there's no one that has 270 electoral votes? There's a total of 538 electors. That's 435 members of the House, plus 100 senators is 535, plus 3 for DC equals 538. A majority of 538 is 270. In 2000, George W. Bush got 271. He made it by 1 electoral vote. If Gore took Florida, he would have won by 28 votes. Bush won by 1. So at any rate, so there's 538 electors. Someone needs 270. What if we get to a point where the states are still debating and no one has 270? There's a tiebreaker mechanism in Article 2 of the Constitution. The tiebreaker is that the House of Representatives picks the president. Now, Democrats are excited to hear that because the Democrats control the House, but it actually would be a Republican selection. Here's why. In the tiebreaker, every state gets 1 vote. So the 27 representatives from Florida and 2 senators, 27 reps from Florida get 1 vote. The 1 rep from Wyoming, who's Dick Cheney's daughter, gets 1 vote. The 2 from Hawaii get 1 vote. The 50-some from California get 1 vote. So every state gets 1 vote and someone needs to get to 26 to win. Right now, 26 of the states have a Republican delegation and 24 have a Democratic. So it would go 26-24 and the Republican Trump would win by 1 single vote. If it went state by state, the Republicans controlled 28 of the states, the Democrats less. So that's how the tiebreaker would work. Has this happened in history? Yeah, several times. In 1800, We didn't get an election result, get this, until the end of February, beginning of March. It took them 4 months in the year 1800. It was an electoral tie, 73 to 73, between Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr, a 73-73 tie. So they appointed the House. Every state got 1 vote, and the House voted, and guess what? It was a tie. So the House voted again, and it was a tie, and again, and again, and again. The House, get this, had 35 tied ballots in the year 1800 and 1801. From November through February, they couldn't break the tie. Why couldn't they break the tie? Because the politics were venomous and disgusting like today. And electors, the House members, were getting their careers threatened. They were getting their lives threatened. On the 36th ballot, one founder stood up and said, let me break the tie and save the country. Hamilton. Now, Hamilton hated 2 people in this earth, Jefferson and Burr. So what a vote did he have? The fire of the frying pan. You've all seen the musical, so you know what happened. Hamilton sided with Jefferson, and Burr would shoot and kill him 4 years later, in part because of that. So he did risk his life. In 1824, Andrew Jackson had more popular votes and electoral votes than John Quincy Adams, but it was a 4-way race. And with all 4 of them splitting the vote, no one had a majority in the Electoral College. Henry Clay, one of my least favorite politicians in American history, who was one of probably the second most corrupt politician, not the most. Henry Clay orchestrated what was called the corrupt bargain, and orchestrated that John Quincy Adams would win the election, and then Adams picked Henry Clay as his vice president. What a corrupt deal, even though I always liked John Quincy Adams. In 1876, Samuel Tilden and Rutherford B. Hayes, in this 1876 election, Tilden was ahead and was 1 vote shy of getting to where he needed to be. But there were 3 states who could not decide how to seat their state electors. They were 3 southern states, Louisiana, South Carolina, and Florida. You knew I was going to say that. What happened was this. It went to the House, and each state would get 1 vote. The House couldn't break the tie. So the House put together a special elections committee with 15 members, 8 Republicans, 7 Democrats. They had a vote. It went 8-7 for the Republican, Rutherford B. Hayes. The deal was all 3 southern states would agree to support Hayes. Hayes came into office in 1877 and ended Reconstruction because the South didn't want Reconstruction. One last one, well, 2000 I already told you about. So I could go on and on and on, but I'm about an hour over anyway. So thank you again for your time, and thank you to the Friends. Make sure you all join the Friends and support the Sterling Road Library, as I always support my local libraries. Any questions?
Let me read the questions from the chat.
You chatting the question?
One of them is, what do you recommend as the best way to submit our mail-in ballot?
Okay, so one of the things I was going to talk about, and I fact checked, is the president has been saying for months that voting by mail is fraudulent. It'll be the biggest hoax in history. It's a fraud. 2 things have been said. Voting by mail is not reliable. It's filled with fraud. And number 2, they don't count the votes that come in by mail. I'm here to tell you both of those are bold-faced lies. Countless scholars study vote by mail, and what they all find is that overwhelmingly vote by mail, it's counted, it's legitimate. Out of hundreds of thousands of votes cast by mail, they might find a few dozen that don't add up out of hundreds and hundreds of thousands over several elections. So vote by mail. If you're worried about it, I would say the following. Put it in the mail several days before the election. The post office is running behind. We've seen efforts to limit the post office's ability to deliver the mail. The post office is otherwise reliable. Just mail it several days beforehand. Let me advise you to do the following. Number 1, make sure the signature on the back of the envelope after you fold it over matches your regular signature. That's one of the ways they confirm if it's really you. So they'll match Rhonda's signature on the back of the vote by mail with her signature when she registered to vote. The second thing to do is most election offices now have a system where you can track your vote by mail. Palm Beach County does. I'm certain that Broward and Miami-Dade would. So you can go on the website, which I did. I voted by mail in the primary, and I went on and I tracked my ballot, and they confirmed that they've received it. So you can do that. If you're really worried, there are drop boxes at different locations. Just go on your county supervisor of elections website, and they'll list all the precincts and drop locations. There's one for Palm Beach County, folks. I live in Boca, on Congress and Delray Beach on the east side of the road. So you can drop it off if you want, or vote in person. We also have early voting. If you're worried, Florida now guarantees 8 days. We used to have more. Our previous governor, Rick Scott, cut it. Early voting. Now in early voting, you can vote at any polling site in your county. In the general election, it must be the polling site you're assigned to. And that's true in most of the states. So we'll have a couple of, maybe a dozen early voting sites, and you can vote at any one of them early. So maybe do that if you're worried about COVID and long lines. Just make sure you vote, everyone. And by the way, Trump, his wife, and his entire cabinet and kids all vote by mail, even though they tell you vote by mail is fraudulent. So voting by mail is fine. There's never been a single academic study that raised a concern about it, not one.
Another question relating to that is, how can you verify or determine what your signature was like when you registered to vote?
Contact the supervisor of elections in your county, and they will have multiple locations. They'll have a main office in Palm Beach County. It's up on Gun Club Road. You don't want to go there because it's near a Trump golf resort. But there's also a couple other locations. You can go there and ask to see a copy of it. So for example, I changed my signature. I changed my signature several years ago when my books started to sell better, and I started getting invitations to go to book festivals, literary fairs. And then, you have to sit there and you might have 100 people in line. You're signing. It takes too long. So I just go RP and then just kind of make a W and a scribble. So because it's a lot quicker to sign. I also on campus have so many clubs and so many committees and task forces that I'm constantly signing documents. So I just made it quicker. So several years ago, I changed my voter registration to match my signature. Okay, so you can contact them.
Okay. We just have a couple more comments. One was your comment about Margaret Smith Chase or Margaret Chase Smith. Yeah, a lot of us were around when she ran. We're older than you.
Come on, come on.
Yeah. Okay. There is one question from somebody who put their hand up. Stuart Herman, are you available?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. Dr. Watson, thank you very much for a very, very interesting lecture as always. You always produce great lectures, and we're always happy to hear, and I hope everybody is listening is safe. I want to ask, first I want to make a comment, then I want to ask you a question. As far as women running for president, let's not forget that Hillary, and maybe wasn't a great candidate, but she did win by 3 million popular votes, and wouldn't have been better for all of us if she had actually become president. But anyway, my question is this. After the fiasco last night and this kind of a performance both of them put on, there's talk today about changing the rules for the next upcoming debate that's coming up. And I want to get your views on that. There's some talk about basically turning off the microphones. When somebody's asked a question, the microphone goes off and the person has 2 minutes to answer. I wonder if you would want to comment on that and let us know what your thoughts are. And some people have advised Biden to bail out of these debates as they're actually useless at this point. And I want to thank you again, Professor Watson, and I want to say hello to our friend Diane Snyder, who I see in the middle of the screen. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Stuart. So, so I don't think Biden should bail. I think that all politicians who are running for any office have a civic responsibility to appear before the voters and ask questions. Having said that, I agree with you, Stuart. I have a very strong sense that we should change. I feel very passionately that we should change the rules, because all politicians have an equal civic responsibility to behave in a civil manner during the debate and allow everybody to speak. They agreed to the rules, so adhere to the rules. I've done a lot of debate moderating in my time. I moderated some state Senate debates up here in Palm Beach County recently. And I was pleased to do so because it had been several years since I used to moderate a lot of debates. I never get asked anymore. The Republicans always refuse, and even a lot of Democrats don't. I'd like to think because I have very few skills, but I think I was a good debate moderator. The reason why is if somebody started giving a canned answer, I said, excuse me, that's a canned answer. Answer the question. You owe it to the public to answer the question, or I'm just going to turn you off. So I used to demand that people answer the question. I did follow-up questions. If they said that the economy's better, I said, give me a statistic, give me a source. So I actually think I put myself in retirement by asking questions. Chris Wallace did an anemic job of moderating that debate, but he's not alone. I think most recent moderators were. If I was moderating, I would have said, sir, have you no shame? Borrow the old line toward McCarthy. You agreed on this? And I would have said, I'm going to ask our technician to turn off the microphone. The American public deserves better. This is a presidential debate, not a bully and a third grade playground. So I do favor changing the rules, although I do think we need 3 debates and 1 vice presidential debate. I will say that I've never longed for a TV commercial so much in my life. It was painful. By anybody's objective measure, Biden won the debate because he was more civil and actually had answers. I fact-checked about 18 claims that Trump made, and he lied on all 18 of them. I fact-checked 10 of Biden's. He was right on 8 out of 10, and the other 2 were about 50-50. But what we need is one of the rules, Stuart. We need real-time fact-checking. You cannot let someone stand up there, especially attacking the president's son. Hunter Biden was in the military, did have a drug problem, but was not dishonorably discharged. You can't have someone doing that, lobbing bombs at someone's son, and lying about it. We need real-time fact-checking, and Chris Wallace should have in his ear and should say, sir, our team of fact-checkers just said that's not correct. Or when Biden said Trump's budget is cutting law enforcement, even though he's claiming to be law enforcement, and Trump said that's a lie, Chris Wallace should have said, in fact, your budget does call for cuts in law enforcement to local policing. He should have said it. When Trump said the mayor of Portland endorsed me, as did all the other mayors, as soon as the debate was over, the sheriff of Portland and other communities went online and said, no, I didn't endorse him and never would. I can't stand him. So Chris Wallace should have an earpiece in, if it's Biden, if it's Trump, and be able to say, sir, we just heard from the sheriff of Portland who said he did not endorse you, he can't stand you, and would never endorse you. So you can't let someone just say, oh, they're all endorsing me. That's one of the reforms we need, Stuart. Thank you. I'm with you on that.
Well, there's no more questions. There's been a lot of comments to say thank you. They enjoyed the presentation. Just a reminder, the recording will be on our website starting tomorrow if you're interested in listening to Dr. Watson's lecture again. I thank you all for attending, and Dr. Watson, I'll be in touch with you. And thanks again to everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Vote. Yeah. Thanks, Rhonda. Thank you to the friends.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Watson.
Rhonda, is it too late to ask a question?
Yeah, we're kind of signing off right now.
I just wanted to...
Give her my email, Rhonda, and I'm in my office for another hour on a deadline.
Okay, give me his email. I've taken courses with you.
Ready? R. Watson, RWATSON, at Lynn, LYNN.edu. And I fact-check presidential debates, inaugurals, State of the Unions for 20-some years for media outlets. I spent the entire day today fact-checking to go through everything. So if there's anything they said, I can write back and tell you if it's true or not. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.